Welcome back, everyone. I am joined here by Ellie. I apologize if he's showing up as a little bit headless because of the background. I swear he's all here. We are now entering the second session advocating for small-bodied animals. My name is Liz, and I'm the philanthropy manager here at Faunalytics. As someone who has 6 rescue cats and 20 rescued chickens, maybe 19 and a half right now. Uh, Small-bodied animals are very near and dear to my heart, literally. Many people already know smaller-bodied animals like fishes, chickens, ducks they suffer disproportionately in industrial animal agriculture. And some of you may know that here at Faunalytics, we share data on this through our animal product impact scales. For example, it requires, and I'm just going to close his ears for a second, it requires 222 more chickens than cows to produce the same amount of meat. Our collective advocacy is even further challenged by the fact that it can be hard to get people to care about non-mammal species like fish or birds, making the problem even harder to solve. And if you ask me, chickens here, like Ellie, are absolutely worth caring for. As advocates, we can't ignore small-bodied animals. That's why I am honored to introduce our next 4 presentations, who will explore the advocacy of fishes, octopuses, shrimps, and chickens, respectively. First up, we have Maya Cullen, a psychologist who will talk about the perceptions of marine animals.
Hi everyone, my name is Maya Cullen and I'm very grateful that you have chosen to join me today at this year's Faunalytics Symposium. Earlier this year, I have published research in collaboration with social psychologists Dr. Carol Jasper and Devin Docherty from the University of Stirling in Scotland. And if you attended last year's symposium, you might remember Devin and her talk on the cheese paradox. However, today I am here to talk about our more recent paper, Out of Sight, Out of Mind. In essence, we conducted interviews with pescatarians to gain insight into why they choose to exclude land animals such as cows and chickens from their diets, but still eat the flesh of various species of fish along with other marine animals such as oysters and shrimp, for example. Why does this matter though? Why should we care about marine animals and what inspired our research? A bit anecdotally, I have a lot of people in my life who follow a pescatarian diet. These are quite outspoken, critical people that care about animals' rights and the climate crisis, and yet they continue to eat fish. You might have also been following former vegan celebrities such as Peter Dinklage or Miley Cyrus, who have both recently declared that the first thing they ate when quitting veganism was fish. Now, why is that? There is a good amount of high-quality research out there on people's motivations to eat meat in general. You might have heard of Loughman's meat paradox, for example, that describes how people say they care about animals while simultaneously consuming them. And this contradiction between someone's beliefs, I love animals, and their behaviors, I eat animals, we refer to as cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance can be uncomfortable. That's why people tend to find strategies to lighten this mental discomfort by rationalizing meat consumption as something that is natural, normal, necessary, and/or nice. And my co-authors Devin and Carol found that vegetarians use similar arguments to justify their consumption of dairy and eggs. However, we do have a little bit less research on the dietary motivations and attitudes of pescatarians, and we don't know so much about their experience of cognitive dissonance. What we do know, however, is that each year approximately 2 trillion wild fish are caught and killed for consumption, along with billions of farm fish and shellfish. So compared to the roughly 80 billion land animals that are slaughtered annually, we are obviously talking about huge numbers of suffering here. We also know that there is a large percentage of bycatch involved in fishing. In fact, up to 40% of animals caught are bycatch, so they accidentally caught even though they're not the target species, and many of them are mammals like small whales or dolphins who are either disposed of on land or dumped back in the ocean, usually already severely injured or dead. And whilst we're talking about this, let me briefly stress that we have very strong evidence to believe that fish do indeed feel pain. In one study, for example, zebrafish were injected with an acidic substance into their lips, and they then subsequently started rubbing their lips on their tongue and the gravel until they were administered morphine, which is when the behavior stopped. And even in a world where fish didn't perceive pain, we do still know that fishing, and commercial fishing practices in particular, are extremely catastrophic to the environment as they destroy our marine ecosystem and are a major driver of anthropogenic climate change. and those are precisely the reasons why we should care about marine animals. Now let us dive, excuse the pun, into our research more specifically. Like I said, we conducted interviews with pescatarians and analyzed them using a method called reflexive thematic analysis, where you identify patterns in participants' responses that allow you to generate themes and a cohesive storyline that is then supplemented with well-established psychological theories and concepts. And in our analysis, we came up with 3 distinct themes that I will go over now. So our first theme is called a fishy identity, and it addresses how many of our participants felt less stable in their dietary identity than expected. They would refer to themselves as vegetarian or even say that they follow a plant-based diet that also includes fish, as exemplified by the following quotes. Participant D said, "I think in my youth I probably did do it because clearly when I first became vegetarian or pescatarian." And participant B said, "I'm just, I guess, a vegetarian who occasionally eats fish." So it appeared that our sample perceived a more proximity to stricter animal advocates like vegetarians and vegans. Their ethics were typically praised as aspirational, and the majority of our participants said that they do eventually hope to stop consuming fish. Which poses the question of why is this change not being made yet, and leads us into our next theme, eating fish as the lesser evil. To be honest, if I felt I could go vegan, I would go vegan, participant S said. See, if I was a celeb or I had a chef, I would definitely be vegan. I just feel like it's not sustainable for me to be vegan and just live life where I'm still enjoying what I'm eating. Now, this was a common response. Our participants mentioned a couple of reasons why they would struggle to eliminate fish from their diet right now. And these reasons mainly revolved around time and effort, cooking skills or the lack thereof, taste, money, social influences, and health. And I do think one participant summed it up quite nicely with the word pragmatism. Nonetheless, after hearing those answers, it still left us wondering, why fish though? Why do our participants feel more comfortable eating marine animals than land animals? And I believe that our third theme, how to become invisible, offers an explanation for that. And this theme basically boils down to 2 significant points. Fish are far away, and they are perceived as dissimilar. And these 2 points regulate each other in the sense that what is spatially far away is also usually perceived as more dissimilar. So it wasn't that surprising that participants ascribed lesser cognitive abilities to non-mammalian marine animals than land animals. Like participant E, who said, "I don't want to sound rude, but fish seem a bit dumber." However, in that same sense, participants were really quite self-reflective as to where these perceptions of fish may stem from, as expressed by participant J. Maybe it's just the fact that we don't interact with them to the same extent as we do with land mammals, you know? And because of that, we don't empathize with them as much. We can't really relate to them as much. And I really want to thank our participants here for being very open and critical of their own choices and for allowing themselves to express and feel their very own cognitive dissonance. And if I don't think about the fish, I can enjoy a bit of fish, if that makes sense, participant D said. So to sum it up, our participants perceived fish as distant psychologically, so in terms of our similarities, and spatially. And this allowed them to continue eating non-mammalian marine animals, albeit a pragmatic compromise and not an ethical ideal. Now, what can we as animal advocates do with this information? Don't forget about the fish. Recent research does suggest that even vegans care slightly less about aquatic animals than land animals. And this is understandable given what we just talked about, but still I do want to remind you to be mindful of not falling into the speciesism trap, as again, over 2 trillion sentient marine animals are killed every single year. And I believe in general we need to get away from our anthropocentric view regarding pain perception and cognitive abilities. There are incredible things that marine animals can do that us humans can only dream about. There's fish that can change color, there's crustaceans that have a more complex visual system than any other animal and can even detect UV light. Salmon find their way back to the stream they were born in, whilst I can't even find my way from Glasgow to Edinburgh without a sat-nav. So they are fascinating creatures that do deserve our attention and advocacy. As far as actionable steps go, first and foremost, we need to continue educating ourselves and the public on the cognitive abilities and sentience of fish. So we really need to equip ourselves with the most up-to-date and reliable research and data to have productive conversations. And in this sense, I would recommend to approach it from all angles. Maybe not everyone is ready to care about the well-being of fish yet, but they might care about their own health or the environment. And education can be fun too, obviously. So here's a couple of books that I think might give you a new perspective on marine life, whilst also being quite accessible. One of them is a children's book. and I'm sure they would be a good gift too. Next, we need to raise visibility. By nature, the invisibility due to this lack of common space between humans and fish does allow us to dissociate from the harm that we are causing. So it is essential to raise marine animals' visibility beyond the easily marketable cute ones like dolphins and turtles. And perhaps we can do this by creating and sharing videos that show the conditions in aquaculture facilities or footage of bottom trawling boats and bycatch, alongside educational facts that frame fish as individuals and not just as faraway masses of foreign beings. And there's great examples of this already being done with factory farming footage by street activism groups such as We the Free, who operate across the globe, for example. But you can, of course, also do this on a smaller scale or on social media. And since money, taste, effort, and cooking skills are significant reasons for people to continue their fish consumption, we should also promote plant-based alternatives to fish and seafood products. So try veganizing a typical fish dish for your family or your work colleagues. And you can go for a cheap alternative here, like a chickpea mayo sandwich as well. It doesn't have to be expensive. But do also contact brands online, tell them what you think of their products and what you would like to see more of. And then lastly, I would recommend to get involved politically. Protest for what you think is wrong, such as the recent plans for octopus farms in Spain. Contact your local government representative and find out what their strategies and policies are to increase the health of the oceans and tackle the challenges that fishing poses. And perhaps also consider joining more organized campaigns like the Plant-Based Councils campaign in the UK, or even a vegan party if you have them in your country, just to increase your effectiveness in creating a vegan future. And specific to fish, you might want to look into the work of Sea Shepherd, who focus on combating illegal fishing activities, which are unfortunately quite common. But no matter what you do, please be respectful to the people that you're talking to. You're likely not talking to someone heartless, but just someone who grew up in a kind of society. And as exemplified by our participants, they might already be quite willing to make a change about their diet. So be a good example and also look after your own well-being, because activism burnout is real. I would lastly invite you to read our full paper, and here's also some social media links if you would like to follow me or my co-authors and stay in touch. And thank you so much for listening. I am really looking forward to hearing your questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Maya, for that presentation. At the note of a chickpea sandwich, I am very hungry now, so thank you for that.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I see that we have a question in the Q&A box. I wonder if the fact that fishes live in a different environment, water, and breathe differently than us and marine mammals has an impact on public perception.
I think that's a really, really interesting question. And first of all, everyone, thank you for being here and thank you for listening to the We Talk. Thank you for bringing your chicken, Liz. God, that was amazing. Yeah, regarding your question, Peter, I do definitely think that does play a role in it. Like I mentioned in my talk, we do have this sort of double whammy where we perceive non-mammalian marine animals as distant as far as similarities go. So yeah, they breathe. Well, we breathe, they live in water. And then also as far as like our spatial distance goes. So again, they live in this water environment. I've never specifically thought about the breathing aspect of it all. I think that's a really interesting point that you make there. It didn't really come up in any of our interviews either, but I think that is definitely one very significant difference between us and them as well. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned how a lot of marine mammals like whales and dolphins, they might come up to breathe, right? We might see them jumping out of the ocean. So maybe decreasing that distance that we have a little bit there.
Amazing. Thank you. There's another question here asking about specific insights for how participants might be inspired to change their choices regarding fish consumption in the interviews.
Any specific how people might be inspired to change their choices. I'm not quite sure what that person means by that, to be quite honest.
I think it's asking if part of the interviews were asking like what choices they would change.
Okay. I see what you mean now, because I think I did say, and most of our participants did express that they wanted to change things about their diet, right? So some participants did outright say that they wanted to go vegan. Some people did say that they just wanted to cut out fish from their diets. For some people, it was specifically changing when they ate fish in certain social settings, because some of them would maybe only eat around their family, because it was a cultural thing, because their family kind of prepared fish dish for them or prepared octopus for them, and they wouldn't eat this themselves, but they kind of felt the social pressure to do it. So I think these are the kind of things that people want to tackle. But a lot of participants did express that they eventually want to go completely vegan, whatever way it takes them to get there.
Amazing. I do see that there's more Q&As, but it looks
Mhm.
like that's all the time we have for questions. So if you want to continue the discussion, please wait until the end of the sessions to go to the breakout room with all the speakers from this session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, we'll be joined by Julia Marillerby, the head of the Global Policy at Aquatic Life Institute, who will walk us through the emerging octopus farming industry and some ways we can try to stop it.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. My name is Giulia Malerbi, and I'm the head of global policy at Aquatic Life Institute. We are a leading organization committed to protecting the welfare of aquatic animals worldwide. And we do this through research, policy advocacy, and collaborative partnerships. Today, I'm here with you to discuss a topic that I am deeply passionate about, the true impact of octopus farming. Now, before we dive into the science and policy of octopus farming, I would like to share with all of you a personal reflection. When I joined Aquatic Life Institute, we were researching octopus farming, and I came across this photo. Now, what captured my attention wasn't the photo per se, but the caption, which says, "Octopus raised in captivity like this one could save their wild relatives from overfishing." Now, I admit to you that I struggle to see this concept of farming as a conservation effort. But I believe that in the field of animal welfare, it is crucial to reassess our beliefs and assumptions. Could farming truly be a form of conservation? So I set aside my doubts and I decided to dive deeper into this claim to better understand its implications. However, our research revealed a much different picture. We came to the conclusion that octopus farming does not benefit their wild counterparts, but rather amplifies other profound issues. And now, after 2 years of advocating against octopus farming, our stance has only become stronger. And as noted in a recent Guardian article, experts argue that octopus farming represents a symbol of what humans shouldn't be doing. Now, let's explore why it is so crucial to oppose this practice. Most of you will know that the global demand for seafood is skyrocketing, putting immense pressure on marine ecosystems. This demand has led to severe overfishing, endangering many species, including octopuses. In response to this reduction of wild octopus populations, there is a growing push for their intensive farming. And just to give you an idea of why we decided to engage in a global campaign, we hear of plans in countries like Spain, Mexico, the US, and Japan. Now, octopus farming is being considered for, I believe, several reasons. First of all, octopuses grow very quickly. They reach maturity within a matter of months. They live only 1 to 2 years, so this allows a very fast turnover in a farming cycle. And they are also considered a delicacy, meaning that they are sold at premium prices in the marketplace. So in my opinion, these reasons, economic reasons, make these animals attractive for intensive aquaculture operations. I also think, though, that in 2024, we just need to look beyond economic profits and consider the true cost to our planet and animal welfare. Starting from animal welfare, most of you will know that octopuses are intelligent, complex creatures. They are very known for their problem-solving skills and cognitive abilities. This means that they require a stimulating environment, making them unsuitable for the typical confinement of farming, where they would lack their necessary enrichment. To them, this would mean stress and boredom. Moreover, octopuses are solitary by nature, so they do not thrive in crowded conditions. Yet we know that a standard industry practice is usually operating at high stocking densities. Additionally, they lack external and internal skeletons, making them particularly vulnerable to injuries and environmental changes in captivity. Currently, there are no humane slaughter methods to slaughter octopuses. Current methods of slaughtering octopuses involve the use of ice slurry, which cause extreme suffering, and even the European Food Safety Authority discourages the use of this method due to the intense pain that it inflicts. Feeding farmed octopuses poses another significant issue because as carnivorous animals, they require a diet of wild-caught fish. So this would just further deplete marine stocks and disrupt marine ocean ecosystems. And from a food security perspective, octopus farming does not provide a viable solution. Octopus is not a food necessary for human survival, but is rather a luxury item. In fact, it is widely consumed in wealthier nations. So this contradicts this claim that octopus farming contributes to global food security because the fish used to feed them could otherwise directly nourish humans. Additionally, octopus farms could become the perfect breeding ground for pathogens, with diseases potentially spreading to wild populations. Given octopus's well-known escape abilities and our limited understanding of their immune system, these risks are substantial. Given our recent experience with the global pandemic, I think there are too many unknowns, too many uncertainties, and just gaps in knowledge to justify the risks associated with this practice. I also want to briefly touch upon the legislative aspects of octopus farming. Based on my research, current legal frameworks governing aquaculture are just not equipped to address the unique needs of octopuses. There are no specific regulations for the welfare of cephalopods, leaving this emerging industry potentially unregulated. Moreover, we have evidence from other aquaculture practices like salmon farming that show that these operations often do not reduce pressure on wild population, but instead increase market demand due to competition, negatively affecting traditional fishing communities and marine biodiversity. To prevent similar outcomes with octopus farming, we must advocate for proactive regulatory measures that prioritize animal welfare and environmental sustainability. Take, for example, global initiatives such as the UN High Seas Treaty or the US Strategic Guidelines for Sustainable Aquaculture. Those emphasize to reduce our reliance on wild-caught fish, as well as protecting marine ecosystems. Now, these objectives octopus farming would just undermine these global objectives. I also want to share with you some considerations that I made in more specific jurisdictions. First of all, the European Union. The European Union has set precedents for animal welfare. For example, banning seal products imports based on protecting public morale. Now, to me, this framework could potentially extend to octopus farming, aligning with this EU principle of promoting an ethical treatment of animals. In the United Kingdom, the UK Animal Welfare or the Sentience Act recognizes cephalopods as sentient beings. Therefore, this creates a legal basis for policymakers to consider banning octopus farming based on welfare concerns. And last but not least, while I'm aware that in the US, the regulatory framework for aquaculture is fragmented, some states are actually taking proactive action. Washington State was the first state that banned octopus farming in this past March. And there are other states like California, Oregon, and Hawaii and Connecticut that are pursuing similar measures. I'm also very happy to share that a federal bill was just recently introduced in Congress that would not only prohibit octopus farming at the federal level, but also prohibit the imports of farmed octopus products, should they ever become available. To prevent the establishment of harmful practices, we must advocate for proactive measures that ensure that animal welfare and environmental considerations are prioritized from the very start, rather than addressed after damage has already occurred. This is why I feel so strongly that we need to enact preemptive measures. Moving on to some actions that you can take, my first suggestion will be to get informed. We have a dedicated campaign that you can check. I put the link here. You can also educate yourself on the issue with other resources like the documentary My Octopus Teacher on Netflix or the book The Soul of an Octopus. You can also sign petitions on our website. Again, you can find a link to the Avast petition, which has over 1 million signatories already. You can join the AAP, which is the Aquatic Animal Policy Focus Group, a group that I specifically run. You can find the link again on our website. Take part in webinars and discussions like this one to stay informed and engaged. I encourage, if you use social media, to spread awareness there. Even write to your representatives if that's something you feel like doing to highlight the issue. So just in general, immerse yourself in the issue. Some key takeaways I would like to leave you with. I think that we should learn from the mistakes that we made in the traditional land animal farming. So continuing down the path of intensive aquaculture, focusing solely on efficiency and cost is just not sustainable. We need a shift towards alternatives that prioritize environmental and animal welfare, like promoting plant-based options for both feed and human consumption. Governments here play a crucial role. Beyond banning harmful practices, they should support recovering programs for wild cephalopod populations, enforcing fishing bans and establishing marine protected areas. It is time to advocate for policies that safeguard our oceans and uphold the ethical treatment of all life forms. So from a sustainable, ethical, and environmental perspective, octopus farming has just no place in our future. Thank you so much for listening to me. I know we have a Q&A session ahead, so I'm really eager to hear your thoughts and questions.
So much for the insightful presentation, Julia. It looks like we have very specific questions, so I apologize in advance if we don't have this information handy. But do you know how many octopus farms there are internationally?
Hi, mates. Hi, everyone. Let me just take one moment. I just wanted to acknowledge the presentation that came before mine. I really, really enjoyed it. And obviously, I believe it's a essential topic, given that that's what we focus on. So just kudos to that. And to answer this question, actually, I love it. I think it's very interesting because, and as mentioned in my talk, our work is a proactive, so a preemptive work. So to date, there are no officially commercial farms, let's put it this way, existing anywhere in the world. So what we have as activists, I would say, it's a huge gold opportunity to stop something before it even takes place, right? Obviously, I'm talking about already established commercial farms. We know of other types of farms that are masquerading as research facilities that unfortunately are, for example, in Mexico. There's one of the based in the university in Mexico City that is technically researching octopus behavior, but also selling baby octopuses as a delicacy to a nearby restaurant. So that's sort of controversial. There was a Hawaiian sort of, again, research farm, but operating as a petting zoo that is now, thanks to the work of amazing activists, now that has been stalled. So yeah, there are some, let's put it this way, masquerading farms, but our objective is to just never see farms established anywhere.
Well, I mean, that's some good news. And another question that came up, because people often see octopuses as more intelligent than fishes, do you think successes limiting octopus farming could be a good way of starting to improve aquatic life regulations, almost like a foot in the door?
Absolutely, absolutely. I always call octopus my champion animal. So I admit to you that sometimes I use this discourse on octopus farming to start the conversation on other aquatic animals that equally deserve protection. So absolutely, we use, I guess I can say, a very charismatic animal that a lot of people maybe relate easier with, to then start talking about other profound issues, for example, linked to another carnivorous animal like salmons, and we start to try address all the problems related to salmon farming, just as an example. So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Julia. I know I learned so much from your presentation. I'm so appreciative that you took time today to join us. It's all the time we have for questions, but I know that every presentation has more questions than we have time to answer. So make sure you join us at the breakout room at the end of the sessions if you want to ask Julia more questions.
Thank you.
Next up, we are going to be welcoming Hannah McKay, a researcher at Rethink Priorities, who will explain how advocates should prioritize one key reform in order to slow the farm shrimp industry and also improve welfare at the same time.
Hi everyone, my name is Hannah. I'm an animal welfare researcher at Rethink Priorities, and today I'll be talking about shrimp welfare, in particular farm shrimp welfare. So to start with some context, shrimp farming affects hundreds of billions of shrimps. Approximately 230 billion are alive on farms at any given moment. And they experience many different welfare issues. Here are just a few. And many of them die before even reaching slaughter age. We found that it's normal for around half of shrimp to die prematurely. And the industry is also growing. You can see the blue line here, which is shrimp aquaculture, is going up almost exponentially. And the industry isn't only growing, it's also changing. So while shrimp farms used to be extensive and built in mangrove areas, we are seeing more and more intensive inland shrimp farms, like on the right here. And farms like the one on the left used to have a very large carbon footprint. And most of that came from the land use change, because mangroves, which sequester a lot of CO2, were destroyed to create the shrimp farms. So there has been a lot of calls for the industry to become more environmentally sustainable. And they are moving towards a lower carbon footprint with these indoor intensive farms. So why is this happening? What's driving this transition? Well, throughout our research, we've learned that there are several reasons, and I'll present them here using the PEST analysis framework, which looks at the political, economic, social, and technological drivers of the industry changing. So starting with political, we are actually seeing significant political encouragement for shrimp farming, particularly farms that are inland and overcome those environmental issues. It's often seen as a sustainable protein source that can increase food security while decreasing environmental impacts. And what's also noteworthy here is that we're seeing this political encouragement in countries that don't traditionally produce shrimp. So more countries are able to farm shrimp with these indoor farms. Secondly, there are economic reasons. Economic growth comes with increased demand for seafood and shrimp, and that leads to increased consumption. So this graph shows GDP per capita and shrimp consumption per capita, and we can see that they are highly correlated. Additionally, global population growth will cause an increased demand for shrimp. And finally, advances in technology have meant that farmers can overcome some of the barriers they used to experience, like diseases. And they do this by increasing biosecurity, often by going indoors. Now, they do still face diseases, but they are seeing some improvement through these biosecurity measures. So to summarize, the shrimp farming industry is growing and intensifying as a result of political, economic, social, and technological factors. This means that there will be more shrimp and new welfare issues. But there is something that's mediating this growth and intensification, and that is increasing stocking densities. So how does this mean that more shrimp are produced? Well, the greater the stocking density, the more shrimp there are per given area. So we can see that intensive farms use less land, but produce more. And this has really underpinned the industry's growth. You can see in the last row of this table that over 70% of shrimp come from intensive farms already. And these estimates are actually from around 2018. So this is likely even higher now, 6 years later. And how does increasing stocking densities present new welfare issues? Well, it affects things like water quality. So oxygen will go down, ammonia will go up. And then it also has other effects like increased aggression or cannibalism. There might be some dominance hierarchies that form if there's more shrimp. And also it might just frustrate the preferences of shrimp. They might not have a preference for being that crowded. And just an important aside that I want to mention is that increasing stocking densities also increases the industry's use of commercial feeds. These are often made of fish meal or soy meal, so there are negative animal welfare or environmental effects from this increase in food too. And the really important thing that might be on the horizon is that shrimp feed could be made more and more with farmed insects. And this would require a lot of individual animals to feed farmed shrimp, again, increasing the animal welfare issues associated with shrimp farming. And a very recent development, just from a couple of weeks ago, is that the first shrimp fed with insects are now being sold. Okay, back to the main topic. So this shows the problem that we're facing from increasing stocking densities. But the good thing is that advocates can have one approach, which is to reduce stocking densities to achieve our two main goals, which are to have fewer farm shrimp and to improve the welfare of the shrimp that remain on farms. Okay, so if our approach is to reduce stocking densities, understandably, your next question is probably how? High stocking densities allow farmers to make more profit, so they're unlikely to be incentivized to lower densities by themselves. So this likely will require intervention or action from animal advocates. And the main recommendation we have is that advocates should avoid interventions that alone would increase stocking densities. So as an example, if we advocate for adding aerators to pond, this would increase the oxygen in the water, which would no doubt improve welfare. But it would also allow farmers to stock shrimp at a higher density. So instead, we suggest that any intervention like this should also be paired with stocking density caps. So some examples of how this could work are if you're working with producers, you could offer services for them that would improve shrimp welfare in exchange for keeping stocking densities low. So the Shrimp Welfare Project do something similar. They provide electrical stunners for humane slaughter on farms, but only if farmers are adhering to some good welfare practices, which can include stocking densities. With retailers and other funders, we could ask them to fund scientific research into what the maximum stocking densities are for different shrimp species, which don't compromise their welfare. And with certifiers, we can encourage them to include stocking density limits based on the research that comes from greater funding. And Aquatic Life Institute have already started contributing to certification schemes to improve shrimp welfare. So to summarize, shrimp farming is growing and intensifying. This currently is not opposed politically, and economic and population growth will continue to increase shrimp demand. Technological innovation is also allowing the industry to overcome what used to be challenges and limitations. So capping stocking densities is essential. Lower stocking densities can help slow the farming growth and improve welfare of the shrimp that are on farms. And just a quick plug, we do have an upcoming report about strategies to help shrimp welfare. So do give that a read and keep your eyes peeled for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I absolutely loved that picture at the end. I wish we could keep it up this whole time. If anybody has any questions, make sure that you put it in the Q&A. We do have one, and they say apologies if you covered this and they missed it. Do you know how this differs across the world? I know different farming techniques like recirculating tanks are more common in some countries than other for fish, but I'm curious if we're seeing certain countries spearheading higher stocking densities for shrimp.
Yeah, that's a great question. The countries that have been farming shrimp for the longest tend to still actually have like some more traditional practices, these extensive farms that are in mangrove areas. So for example, Bangladesh has a lot of extensive farms, and it's more the like main exporters. So for example, China, Vietnam, and Ecuador that are really pushing the stocking densities at the moment. But like I mentioned in the talk, we are seeing more and more countries starting to try to fund recirculating systems and intensive systems in countries that don't normally farm shrimp. So for example, the UK recently gave some money to a shrimp farm to set up in the UK, which wouldn't be possible without these intensive practices because the UK just doesn't have the climate for that.
Great, thanks, Hannah. Another question, isn't better welfare standards just more economically profitable for the industry and increased time of suffering the shrimp, question mark. Any thoughts on it, if it's better that they die younger or older?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's always hard to answer. It's very conflicting to possibly come out with a conclusion that high mortality pre-slaughter could be better overall. The other consideration there is all of the shrimp that are dying before they even reach slaughter age. If we prevented those deaths, the industry would become even more profitable and produce even more shrimp as well. So it's really hard to come out one way or another with that. I'd be really excited to see more research into shrimp sentience. There's a possibility that very young shrimp aren't sentient and maybe don't suffer in the same way that adults do, but we actually have no idea about that right now. But if that were the case, then that would really help in order to come out with like a clear answer on that question.
Thank you. And I saw as well that Carl put in the chat that Faunalytics is going to be publishing a blog from you in mid-October on the topic of shrimp welfare. So everybody should make sure to check that out. One more question we have is, how many advocacy groups are working on shrimp welfare? Is the best way to get started on this issue to get involved with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's not that many so far. This is really only just starting to gain momentum in the animal advocacy space. Mercy for Animals just did the first ever shrimp public campaign and protest. Aquatic Life Institute and the Shrimp Welfare Project and Wakker in the Netherlands have done some work on this. I would definitely say reach out to them if you want to learn more about the specific steps that they're taking. I would also encourage more advocacy groups to get involved if you can.
That's wonderful. Gosh, well, thank you so much, Hannah. Anybody who wants to continue the discussion and ask more questions afterwards, please wait until the end of the session and go into the breakout room with all the speakers. We only have one speaker left of this session, so you'll be able to ask your questions in no time. For our final speaker, I'm very excited to introduce Jenny L. Mace, a lecturer at the University of Winchester, who is going to present her research on companion chicken care. I will be making sure that I grab Ellie so we can catch this one.
Hi everyone, welcome to this presentation on pushing the boundaries in companion chicken care. So I'm Jenny Mace and I'm currently an associate lecturer with the University of Winchester in the UK, and I'm also an independent researcher via Mace Animal Welfare, and it's through that avenue that this study arose, very much a pro bono study, and it's also been inspired by my own experiences as an ex-commercial hen carer. We're just going to go through a bit of an introduction and some background information before looking at the aims of the study, and then looking at some of the most significant findings before leaving you with some recommendations. So despite being disputed figures, chickens do rank as the third most common companion animal if they're counted as individuals. For instance, around 5 million in the UK and 85 million in the USA, just to take two exemplar countries. Of course, one reason that they're disputed is that not everyone with chickens in the home environment, or so-called backyard chickens, will necessarily deem them as a companion animal. Another perspective is looking at the number of hens that are rehomed due to the burgeoning practice of rehoming ex-commercial hens. This is particularly prevalent in the UK, but also increasingly common in other countries. So in the UK, one of the key charities that does this is the British Hen Welfare Trust, and they rehome over 60,000 hens each year relative to, for example, 8,500 dogs by the Dogs Trust. So we're talking many, many hens here due to the, as we know, high turnover of farmed hens in the egg industry. The research to date has typically been limited to biosecurity matters or a very limited focus on hen health, but more recently there has been an increasing focus on welfare, and one study by Singleton et al. 2021 found alarmingly high euthanasia rates for chickens that ended up in veterinary practices. It was 30 times that of dogs. So for this reason, more research is needed, and this study sought to shed more of a light on chicken caretaking practices and guardian attitudes, and sought to shed light on the human-chicken relationship as well as barriers to improving chicken welfare. Specifically, it was intended to focus on novel or niche caretaking practices, for instance, the use of hormonal implants, most commonly known by the brand name of Suprelorin. And these are little insertions about the height of your little fingernail and about the width of a pin, and they're injected into a hen's back for the purpose of stopping egg laying temporarily or longer term if it's repeated, say every 6 months. They're not cheap. They are over £100 per implant. And most of the evidence regarding their use is anecdotal at the moment. There's a lack of formal evidence. We also wanted to gather data on the care of disabled chickens and indoor hens and roosters as well. So we did this through a questionnaire which garnered over 2,000 responses. And some of the key results then, first of all, beginning with guardian diets, which has not previously been surveyed about. You can see plant-based vegan and vegetarian diets are much more overrepresented in amongst chicken guardians relative to a general population, taking the UK as an example. But still the vast minority, so over 3/4 are still omnivores. But nevertheless, it's interesting to see a greater representation of vegetarians and vegans. Within the omnivores, further inquiries were made. For instance, is there an avoidance of chicken meat specifically? But only a very minuscule percentage did as such. There's very much a status of chickens as companion animals amongst the respondents, and we have a list of points as evidence for this here. So approximately 70% thought it was wrong to breed hens for maximum egg production. Over 93% would never kill their chicken for consumption. A smaller majority of 65% do take their hens to the vets, and 75% deemed their chickens as moral equivalents to dogs. Similarly, around 75% name their chickens, and a majority of respondents, 70%, kept primarily ex-commercial chickens. This study also found for the first time that preventing chickens going to slaughter was one of the key reasons for keeping chickens. Shifting our perspective to the cause of death of respondents' chickens in the last year, I wish to flag from this chart that egg yolk peritonitis is the 4th most common cause here. This is an internal infection in a hen due to an egg not passing and essentially cracking and opening internally, leading to infection. And this is one thing that the implants are deemed able to treat, interestingly. And predation is the 3rd most common cause, with sudden death, an unknown cause, coming out on top. Egg yolk peritonitis emerged as a leading cause for the first time in this study, and this high number of deaths with an unknown cause speaks to the persistent dearth of knowledge regarding chicken health and welfare, even amongst experts. And also we found that 10%, only 10% of respondents use postmortems where they can find out the cause of their chicken death. So this could be promoted more. In terms of implants, almost 70% had not heard of the implant, with 54% of these people still not considering its use after being given some basic information about it. And the main reason for this was cost, as well as perceptions of it being too much of an intervention. Amongst the 30% who had heard of it, the so-called implant aware, 76% still did not use it. Again, cost was a chief factor here, as well as concerns about even temporary side effects. 20%, however, did use it, primarily when a health problem emerged versus in a routine capacity. Associations were also found. So it was found that males were more likely to use the implants. Those reducing or eliminating more animal products from the diet were more likely to use the implants, as were younger people in terms of having heard of the implants, as well as, again, those eliminating more animal products from the diet were more likely to have heard of the implants. So then, a whistle-stop tour of the recommendations for you. We have done a spotlight on the implants in this presentation simply because it's the most novel aspect from the study. So it's definitely useful to refer to chickens as an interesting case as a species that straddles both the livestock and companion animal categories. And it's not all bad what goes on in backyard chickens. There's lots to celebrate about the human-chicken relationship there. We can raise awareness about hormonal implants and connect their use to the ultra-high levels of egg production that's been selectively bred into them, so over 300 eggs per year versus 12 per year of their ancestors. And we can just be reminded of the problems inherent still within backyard egg production in this way. And we can also push for more licensed use of the hormonal implants, especially in the USA, where it's not permitted even using the so-called cascade effect, whereas it is in the UK. Please do follow this the details here of the paper if you wish to look up anything further about it. We covered a lot. I've touched just on the very most important finding in my view, but there's a lot there. So thank you very much, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Ellie and I absolutely loved your presentation. I can see that we have a few questions in the chat. One of them talking about veterinarian education. So they say veterinarian education and curriculums in India are focused on maximizing production. For rescue animals, there is almost no way to help the debilitating issues these animals suffer from. Any resources that can help rescue animals, or I think their question is, are there any resources that can help rescue animals, specifically chickens and roosters, that can make it easier for the birds we rescue?
Oh, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. It's really an honour to be here, and an honour to meet Ellie virtually as well. Really great question, and as hinted at in the presentation, there's so much research that needs to go on, and what research is going on at the moment is probably focusing on Western countries as well, unhelpfully to you, sadly. I am aware of some fantastic resources, particularly coming out of the US in terms of the micro sanctuary movement, for instance. You can Google that, and there's lots of resources there regarding rescuing on a much smaller scale. Of course, there are farmed animal sanctuaries probably worldwide, but definitely in Western countries. I know India is no stranger to farmed animal sanctuaries as well. So it's just, I'm not sure if that's answering the question, but I do appreciate the tricky aspect, the dilemma, the barrier with the veterinary education system that you speak of, and the same will be going on in other countries to lesser or greater degrees as well. And actually, my next research project that I've just started is interviewing veterinarians from different countries about specifically about the implant, but again, there's so much research that needs to be done. It could be about any particular avenue. Please come back to me if I haven't answered your question.
That's great. And speaking of implants, I'm located in Canada. They are quite expensive here as well, about 700 Canadian. So what would your recommendation be for those who are trying to encourage their veterinarians to advocate on behalf of making them legal or at least more accessible?
Yes, definitely. I think a few things. So one, supporting more research. Again, this seems a bit of an intangible recommendation because it's like, well, how do you do that kind of thing if you're not a researcher? But I imagine veterinarians through various veterinary associations and membership bodies, that could be one avenue, for instance. And as well as this, there are other avenues, thinking about the companies selling these implants. Virbac is a particularly well-known one, and I think pressure could be put on to them in terms of lowering the cost or licensing them for chickens as well, because they're only officially licensed for ferrets and dogs. So in the countries where their use is legal, they follow the cascading method, as I think I mentioned, just kind of tailor their use to other species. And even though countries where it's legal with the implant use, you can get around that, it just doesn't speak very much to the moral status of chickens, I suppose, if they're not officially licensed for them. So I think all these little things have a knock-on effect on kind of social attitudes towards chickens. I know there is a petition going in the US as well, which surprisingly, actually, given the kind of growing number in the animal rescue movement, it's really not doing very well on its numbers. I can gladly send the link to Faunalytics if you like, but that would be great to see more signatures to that, and that's kind of targeting the FDA, I think. So yes, no easy answer. We're definitely in it for the long haul, I think, rather than a quick change.
Wonderful. And we have time for one more question. And I assume this may be the case for many people who are here. They want to know if there are any like online consultations or specific medical interventions rescuers can use, even if there isn't a direct resource available in their country.
Yes, I do believe there is. So in the UK, for instance, there's the British Hen Welfare Trust. I believe, I don't know 100%, but I believe they do take emails and calls internationally, and they have, for instance, a hen hotline where you can phone and ask medical advice questions. Similarly, I know the veterinary nurse member of staff there is happy to receive emails as well regarding random cases that sometimes even leave exotic vets a little bit baffled.
Well, that sounds like an absolutely amazing resource. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for your time and sharing your expertise. We'll try and get a link for that in the breakout room. So make sure you join the breakout room so you can ask all of our panelists some questions. This concludes our second session of the day. So for continued discussions on any of these topics, please follow the link in the chat. It's a Google Meet breakout room for advocating for small-bodied animals. And that's where you can ask all your questions. And the next session Strengthening the movement. Oh, we might actually get a crow here. Strengthening the movement will start at 3 o'clock. So that's in about 11 minutes. We will see you then.